Okay, now for the conditional logic. In the past, I've done this several ways, and one was using true-false, and it's way too cumbersome. I could show you, but ultimately I'm just going to confuse you. So I'm going to do it the most efficient way, in the way that basically Storyline is set up to be used. And I'm going to do that on this new screen here. You can see that we have 1, 2, 3, 4 areas to visit. In this particular one, when we did this previous exercise, we were doing a procedural, right? So it was okay for them to go to step 1 and then we unlock this and unlock this. So we were forcing them to go in a certain pattern. So we didn't really need much conditions because when they got to the last step, that's when our next button showed up. But in this case here, it's more discovery, right? So that's that whole learner agency theory that people talk about, where you want to give the learner kind of the most control you can. And you do that by just putting out some areas where they can visit and letting them choose as they will. So that's what we're going to do in this case. All I did was kind of replicate what we've done before, the circles and the lines. I put our young lady up there and labeled it appropriately. And the goal here, I'm going to show you some cute little things to make things look relatively nice, is for it to look as such. So I'm going to save this slide. And all I want to do is have the ability to pick any of these, have a layer come up, it look a certain way, and then when I close it, have it disappear. And then, of course, we'll have some sort of state on all of these. Okay, so the first thing that you want to do, especially when you have these buttons, you know that it's going to be conditional logic. You know that we have to do a state. So we're going to do an edit state. We're just going to use a built-in one. Now remember, when you go to use states, and you definitely want to use it in a trigger sense, always use a built-in one. Do not use, or excuse me, do not force it to visited, do not force it to selected or disabled. When you use a built-in state, it'll automatically do that in Storyline. So I'm going to say visited, I'm going to say add, and all I'm going to do is change the fill to gray. And then I'm going to say done editing. So there I have visited. Good. I'm not going to get into the details of this just yet. I just want to make sure that it's been visited. So I'm going to go to the next one, edit states, add a new one, make sure it's built in, visited, add, format, fill, gray, done editing states, edit states, add, built in, visited, add, gray, done editing states, edit states, built in, visited, add, shape fill, done editing states. So there we have it. I'm just going to preview this quick. Now you know I didn't use any triggers, I didn't do anything in the panel, but when I click on this, now I close it, you see that it's gray. Click on this, gray, gray. Okay? So everything is okay. I didn't have to put any triggers over here whatsoever. But what I'm going to show you now how to do is how to replicate what I've done here. And I want to do that because if you see on the timeline, I have this cue point here. And that's really something interesting that I'd like to show you and finish up with. So the first thing I'm going to do is make a layer. I'm going to call it this. I want to call it this because it's in conjunction with this layer here. It doesn't have to look the same, it just needs to feel the same. And I'll show you what the right way to do here is in a moment. The first thing you want to do, I put, what I like to do in this sense is, this is what's called glass box when you do a design. And that's, you don't ever want to take the learner fully away if you're doing a tabbed interaction or anything like that. You want to make sure they know that they're in part of a process or part of a whole. And you do that by doing this whole, what am I going to say here? Glass box. So, I mean, it's literally what you think it is when you think about it. It's something that you can see through. So I'm going to format my shape. I just clicked on it, right-clicked, and I'm going to set my transparency. I don't remember what I did, so let's say 25. So you can see I can actually still see what's going on back there, that I'm part of that process. That is fine. That is okay. Got my rectangle. Next, I'm going to put my content in there, right? So I think I used this shape here, right? I'm going to move my little, see that? I'm going to move this because I just want to. I like to use a white background more often than not, and I'm not a big fan of outlines. So there we go. Now you know that all I have to do is type in this. And then to align this how I have it in the other one, I just align left, and then I went ahead and I used the alignment up here. But also I want to put it at the top just to facilitate things that way. And then there we go. I'm just going to quickly go get some information out there. Let's see. There we go. Same thing, I just went ahead and selected it. Now I'm going to knock that down. I know 14 seems fine. Again, put my alignment out there, and there I go. I also have that little shape in there. That is nothing more than a square that I grabbed, which I turned into a rectangle. And that's just to break up the content a little bit, right? And if you want to, you can use different colors so they know they're in a different section. That's entirely up to you. But also what I did is I had a character in there, you saw, and there's other ways to do it, right? Like I could have used a text a text box and then just pushed it down, but I don't want to do that because it's easier when you're using animation. So all I'm going to do is go down here and just hit return and kind of make room for her. I'm going to grab her. Here she is. I'm not going to make it anything too crazy. I just want to make sure that she's there, able to be seen. And I'm going to do this. And then you also notice I had a close button, right? That is up here. I'm just going to insert. I'm going to grab my button like I always do, put it down here. I think I called it done. And let's see, I'll match it with that. Button fill. And button border, same. So here's something I did that I want to show you. You see when I click on this button here, double click, whatever it is, I have this option over here. See that it's called button icons? You can actually pick anything here, and I think I use this one here. So I'm saying done. You see what I did when I clicked that? It put a little icon up there. And there's tons of these that can make it really, really, really appropriate or inappropriate, whatever you want to do. It's just a neat thing to use. So I now have everything set up, right? So if I go to my other slide, it's relatively the same. You see that I have all of these things going on. But now, as we've done before, I want to go ahead and put the words correct on here so there's no misspellings. I want to go ahead and put animations on all of this, right? And all I'm going to do is click on the things that I want to animate. So this particular one, I want it to fly up. Go to animations, fly in from the bottom. We're good. I'm going to go to this. I want this to fly in, fly in. Let's see, from the left. And I want her to fly in. From the right, but I want her to be a little bit later, so I'm going to come down here as we do, and I'm going to pull that back. Okay, so that should mimic what we want. We're going to do that by simply going to the this, and you know how to do the show layer, so I'll do that. I'm going to say show layer this when user clicks. I guess I called it oval 5. Is that the one? Oval 5, yes. Okay, and then we're going to test it. So I'm going to go stuff, okay, good, done, and then I'm going to go to this, looks great, and then done, nothing happens. Couple things, what I like to do, especially when I'm doing layers, is my done shows up here right away. I don't want that to show up until later, so I want them to really get an eye on the content and see what's going on before they realize how to get out of there. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that back to about 2, maybe this way. So now that'll show up later. Now the other thing that's very interesting that I want to show you and what we're going to do next that I really like is when I click on this layer and I go to hit done, actually everything goes in reverse versus just disappearing. It's a very subtle thing to do, but it's really nice. And to do that, all you have to do is put an exit animation on everything, right? So when I click on this, you can see right now it says fly in, and then everything's going on, but now I have an exit animation opportunity, and all I have to do is the opposite. So that's fly in, and then the direction is left, so I'm going to say fly out, and I want it to fly out to the left. Speed doesn't matter. Same thing with this. This is flying up, so I'm going to say fly out, but I'm going to go ahead and say to bottom, and then with her I'm going to go ahead and say fly out, and then to the right. So now everything is going to disappear as I want, but it's going to happen automatically, right? So now I'm going to go ahead and preview this, and what you're going to see is that when I click on this, everything is going to fly in, but it's also going to, wait a moment, and it's going to fly out. We don't want that, right? We want that to fly out when they pick done. And since this is timeline controlled, what we're going to do is something similar that we did in Captivate with those pause buttons. Now you remember when we put a button in Captivate, there was that little pause thingy? We're not going to do that here. What we're going to do is do something called a cue point. So we know that each one of these animations is about, I don't know, what, 3/4 of a second. So what we want to do is kind of come out here a little bit, which is fine. We can do about 1.5 seconds, and then right-click in this timeline. You see what my thing is? All I'm going to do is right-click up here in the timeline, and it says Create Cue Point at Playhead. Oh, geez. I guess you should actually put the playhead where you want it to be, not just your arrow. So there it is. There's my playhead. All I'm doing is clicking up here. You see I'm clicking, I'm clicking, I'm clicking. And then right-click and Create Cue Point at Playhead. When I did that, you see the number 1 comes up here. So I can actually now tell Storyline, can go make a trigger and say pause this timeline. So right down here, more. Pause timeline. Which timeline? This layer. When the timeline reaches cue point 1, then I'm going to hit OK. So all I did by putting that timeline, that cue point in there, for those of you who've done video before or what have you, basically all I'm saying is go ahead and play, but pause when you get right here. That way all my animations are happening, but pausing here allows me to look at all of this, understand all the information. So I'm going to go ahead and preview this. Click on this, and you see it comes in. Everything is okay. Just stops. So now we're going to get clever with it. Now with this done button here, we're not saying, hey, hide at this point anymore, right? What we're saying is we want you to continue this timeline. So we're going to go ahead and say resume timeline, this layer, when the user clicks, oh geez, button 1, I think it's the only button I have out there, right? Is it button 1? Yeah, button 1. So now we're saying go ahead and resume that timeline, right? So go ahead, go to here, when they hit done, just continue playing that exit animation when you want. So here we go. Everything comes on, we pause, we get to read what we want, now we're done, so I click done, exit animations, but we're not completely good, right? There's still stuff happening. You could, in fact, if you wanted, make everything disappear, but that's not good, depending on how you want to make things work. So what we're going to do is add one more trigger, and what that trigger is going to say is hide layer, this layer, but when we're going to do it when the timeline ends, right? So think about it. This layer here, what we're saying is go ahead, go to that cue point and pause. And then when they click the button, it's going to continue. And then when it hits the end of this timeline, it's going to hide this layer. So we're essentially making that button a hide, but it's just doing so in a timing sense versus immediately. Right? So now I'm going to hit this and say preview. And quite simply, when I click on this, everything cool happens. We read everything we want. We click done, exit animation, and it hides. Very simple, very cute. And then now we're done.